Welcome back to Mindful Endeavors. I am your host, New Age Alchemist. And before we get into our episode, a quick disclaimer: we're not medical professionals. We're not giving mental health advice or any medical advice. We're just here to talk about the topic and other outdoor activities as a way of kind of decompressing and just enjoying life a little bit more and be a little bit less stressed. So back again, joining us is the archer Steph, and I definitely enjoyed our conversation that we had last time. But you're here again because there's some other things I want to talk about. And really quick, introduce yourself again for those that weren't aware of like the other episode.
Yeah, and then they're going to go back and they're going to check out the other episode. So
Yeah.
hey guys, I'm Stephanie. I am from Northwest Washington. I grew up shooting a bow. I ended up working at a bow shop and running an archery club. Went off to college and basically thought I was giving up archery because I just didn't have any opportunities to shoot my bow. And then when I moved home, I actually worked at a bank for a little bit, and that was one of the worst jobs in the world for an outdoorsy person. And so I happened to see a post on Facebook for a position for archery education with the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Oregon. I worked down there for 2 years, and then I've moved back to Washington, and now I work for the National Archery in the Schools program, getting archery curriculum into 4th through 12th grade. So it's super fun. I get to work with all kinds of school teachers and children, and I have probably one of the best jobs in the world.
That's awesome. I didn't really know what a bow was until I got to college, where I saw like the archery class that they had for like kinesiology, and I was just like, "What's that? I didn't know you can do that." So it's good that you're getting exposed younger, because I think it definitely is beneficial.
For
So,
sure.
all right. So one of the things I wanted to bring up, so I did, because I do follow you on Instagram a lot, and I actually I pay attention to a lot of your posts, and I did see one where you were talking about how there's people that practice comfortably at like 40 yards, 50 yards, but when they're out hunting, they'll take like a 70-yard shot, which is almost kind of impossible for that skill level at that point, because you're not really prepared. And I mean, I kind of agree in the sense that it's a little bit irresponsible to do that, especially unethical. I mean, when you consider ethics in terms of respecting nature and things like that. So you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I think the gist of the post that I made was always practice for the situation you're going to be in or a harder situation. That way, when you're out hunting, you're prepared for the worst that can happen. I've known some people personally, and they're just so proud of, my bow sighted in for 60 yards, but I had an elk walk out in the meadow at 80 yards, and I just thought, man, this is the only time I'm ever going to have a chance to shoot a 6-point bull elk, so I'm going to take it. Never shot anything at 80 yards before. To me, it's unethical. You don't really want a chance wounding an animal like that. Either try to get closer if you can, call the animal into you, or just sit back and enjoy the beauty of it and think about what you're going to do next time or what you could have done differently in that situation. I've definitely spooked my fair share of animals trying to get close to them. Mule deer, elk, you have to be super sneaky to get up close to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it comes down to respecting nature, because it's we want it to be there for everybody and for future generations to come, right? So and there's really no point of especially when you're hunting, whether it be game or just for food, there's no point of making an animal hurt more than it should, right? Like, you're trying to go for a quick clean kill as fast as possible. And if you run the risk, because I know, just like, and we've talked about a little bit last time, speaking from like the firearm side, like sometimes people don't take into account wind, and they think that whatever you're shooting at, like a certain distance, it's going to be the same constant at like twice that amount. But wind picks up from like here to like even like 10 feet, and imagine going for like 100 yards, like it's something that we need to take into account, especially because again, we want to respect wildlife and everything. And even like I know people, or I've seen people that like I mean, granted, they're not aware of it, but I've seen people like hold fish with gloves because they're really concerned about the slime getting on their hands. And that's very, very bad, because that slime is actually a very protective for the fish when they're inside, so it protects them from getting infections around their skin. So when you grab them, especially like more delicate fish, like a trout, you grab them with the glove, you take that slime off, so now you throw them back in there, and then that spot ends up being infected and end up eventually dying. So it's same similar concept where it's like, like you got to be familiar with what you're going to do before you go into it like all the way.
Yeah, and so those are some of the recommendations that I give to people. Um, as you go further distances, you're usually doubling your on your site tape or in your housing. And so, you go from 20 to 30 yards, it's a pretty small gap. Well, then you double
Mhm.
it when you go to 40, and then you double it when you go to 50. So it gets harder and harder to judge what that distance is going to be if it's not something that you already have sighted in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, the wind, like even like, I mean, I'm just going to kind of like cross reference it to a lot of things that I do. Like I'm trying to cast out, sometimes like mid cast, the wind all of a sudden picks up. So I'm thinking I'm going to aim this way, and then just ends up going like 10 yards to the right, just because of the
Yeah.
wind, just the guts just magically came out of nowhere.
And
So,
same thing with archery. You never know what the wind's going to do. You never know if there's a branch that you didn't see or a fern sticking out. 3Ds are a great way to go practice
mhm.
different spot situations, because if you're going to be shooting off a hill or out of a stand or out of a ground blind, you should really have those set up prior to going out on the hunt, just so that you're ready for whatever situation you're going to be in and not trying to figure out how to get that shot off the first time in that scenario.
Yeah. And I think it really comes down to like we really shouldn't get like too overconfident on certain things. Um, like you said, like in that scenario that you gave, like they're excited about seeing a 6 point buck at 80 yards, and they're like, well, I'm never gonna see a 6 point buck before in my life, so let me just take a crack at it. So it's like, I think it kind of goes with like being a little too confident, maybe. I don't know if you agree with that, but
Confident, cocky, not having respect for the animals like they should. There's people out there who they're hunting to provide for their family because they respect the game, because they enjoy being in nature. And then there's people who are out there that just want to shoot stuff. And
yeah.
so it comes down to that's the difference between being an ethical person and not.
Yeah, and it's oftentimes, and it's just I don't know why it works out that this way, at least in my opinion. Oftentimes, those people that get the generate the bad press around all this stuff. So then, when like somebody else sees somebody that actually does it ethically, it's like, oh, you're just another person just wants to shoot stuff and everything, and you're very responsible. But it's like no, like you know somebody like you take the time and the energy to actually know what you're doing before you go out and hunt, or you go out and just shoot a bow in general, because at the end of the day you're responsible for what leaves your bow, right?
Exactly. And earlier you mentioned that you wanted to get your minimum out to 50 yards. Well, my maximum for any hunting situation is actually 50 yards.
Oh,
Not because that I don't think I can shoot further. I mean, I go to some events and they have 100-yard targets out there, but because there is so much that can happen in the time it takes from the arrow to get to the animal. It's not like a gun, maybe max 350 feet per second. That animal takes one step out and all of a sudden you got a gut shot if they're out at,
yeah.
30 yards or 80 yards. So it's really just judging the situation that you're in. And
Hmm.
just in my mind, I know I'm pretty confident 40, 50 yards. And I know that if something changes, I can probably correct it. Well, not the arrow in mid flight, but I
Yeah.
can stop myself from shooting if something changes.
No,
So,
yeah, absolutely, because again, it's similar to firearms, but like obviously, like you said, like the feet per second is like 350, where it's like you're looking at like 1,000 feet per second, sometimes a little bit under. um, but you know when it comes to like a firearm, when you have it like properly sighted, you would kind of like make sure you're scoped at like at least 100 yards. Doesn't
mhm.
necessarily mean you always want to take the 100-yard shot. You want to take it like at least somewhere a little bit closer, because again, it's the same thing with like the wind factor and everything. Like even though now we're looking at like 100 yards, and yes, we're looking at 1,000 feet per second, but at that distance, the animal could still make a quick move, because like deer, they're fast and everything. So uh, they can turn around the wrong way, or just something else that's around them might startle them before you even pull the trigger.
Right.
So like right, a split second before you pull it. So it's very similar. So I guess, yeah, like what I was trying to say, like I want to be proficient at minimum 50 yards, but I don't necessarily want to take like anything more than that, right? Like I want to
Yeah,
get
that
as close
makes
as
sense.
possible.
Yeah.
What was that?
Oh, I just said that makes sense. And I mean, most archery opportunities are probably going to be at 20, 30 yards. You That's what I was saying. You'd be surprised earlier because you never know. You just end up walking out and it's a game of luck. And you
Mhm.
walk out in the woods and there something is and you get that opportunity.
Yeah, so I'm a little weary about being 20 to 30 yards away from an animal because I have been chased by boar before, and that's
Yes.
not fun. Out here in Texas, that's not fun at all. And it was my first time being out in the woods like that, basically by myself. And I mean, yeah, without any experience in the woods or anything like that. I just hear the little pitter patter, and all of a sudden I just hear it go fast, and just next thing you know, I'm up a tree, probably like 6 or 7 feet up a tree, and I'm just like, I don't even know how I got there. I can't even climb very well, to be honest.
Right.
Like, so
It just happened.
yeah, like the fight or flight response, and yeah, so I'm a little weary of being like 20, 30 yards, but obviously, if I'm smart about it and not just go out willy nilly without thinking like, hey, I'm the only one here, and like, no, there's like other things that can kill you, like, so relax, like you're not,
Yeah. When I'm
yeah.
in Colorado, I've seen bears out there, but bears aren't really my biggest worry. On my last trip there, I just ran into a moose every time I turned around.
Oh wow.
And moose are kind of scary because they're actually the one. A deer or an elk, I know if I get too close, they're gonna pretty much run away unless they're mid run or something. A moose is just gonna trample you whenever you find it. And so I've been like sitting.
Oh god. Hold on, give me a second.
That's okay. Um,
Sorry, it's my work computer. I don't know why it's singing. All right, go ahead.
um, Moose, yeah, you just have to be aware of your surroundings. And I mean, we go out to enjoy nature, and that's when you really start learning to pick apart the little things. You start listening to the birds, or is that a chipmunk or is that a deer walking by? And so
Mhm.
you always keep your head up, looking around. I have a problem where I'm just looking down all the time, trying not to trip over rocks and stumps and roots and stuff, but look up every couple steps. 1, 2, pause, take a look. 1, 2, pause. That's a good tactic, and it keeps you slow and quiet so that the animals don't run away too.
Yeah, yeah, because you were saying that a moose will trample you, and I've seen videos of how fast a moose can run, and then how big it is compared to a
They're
car.
huge.
Yeah, like even a little bit. Like I remember the first time I ever saw one. I don't know if it was on TV or where, but it wasn't like live. But I thought it was all right. That's how big moose can get, and it turns out it was just a baby one. And I was like, it's like they can get bigger than that. Like holy crap!
They're huge for sure.
Yeah. And then like when you look at like videos of like grizzly bears like just taking down, like, how do you say the plural of moose? Is it just moose or is it meese or
I think
I
it's
don't know. I'm
just
just
moose. I'd probably say something silly like mooses, but
mooses. All right, let's just say mooses. Like they'll just straight up take down mooses like nothing and just carry them up like a hill like they didn't weigh anything. It's like, dude, you're looking at like easily like 1,000 plus. I mean, I'm being very I mean, I'm not giving it a good, estimate, but I would assume minimum 1,000 pounds. That's the weight of the animal, and then the bear's just grabbing it by its teeth.
yeah. Yeah,
So
no, I don't like. My dad's like, okay, let's just walk fast and get by it, and I'm like back there trying to tiptoe around it, making sure it doesn't see me as we walk through the opening.
yeah.
There,
So now another question, because again, we want to make sure that we're like properly spec at to be able to like again be as ethical as possible. But like in terms of like the broadhead, like you know like you can't just go in there with any broadhead, right? Like you just have to like get something that's you know equipped. I don't know if it's varies from animal to animal.
I've used the same ones for deer and elk, and it works out. 100 grain fixed blade. I tried some expandables for the first time last year. I didn't get for turkey hunting. I didn't get to shoot them at anything besides a target though. So yeah, it just depends on your grain, and there's a certain ratio in the regs that you have to meet for weight and everything. But
Hmm.
as long as you're meeting those, and then check your regs and make sure you can shoot expandables wherever you are. Um,
Okay.
but the thing is you want something that's sharp. So read the reviews, make sure that it's going to make a clean slice. Some broadheads will cut through bone, which is pretty
Oh,
amazing. But that's how an arrow kills an animal is through slicing it and then bleeding and then blunt force or trauma.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not like a bullet. It's more of the slicing motion that has to happen.
Yeah, but can you explain more or less when you're talking about like the broadheads that expand, like what does that exactly mean?
So they have a little band around the blades that hold them into a condensed position compared to your normal broadhead that has, let's say, 3 razor blades sticking out the sides.
Hmm.
And then upon impact, the blades basically slice that rubber band off and the blades expand so that you
Okay.
get, rather than a 1 inch or a half inch distance, you get like a 2 inch blade that cuts through the animal. And so
Gotcha.
one of the biggest concerns for people is that it's not going to open and you're going to wound something. But broadhead expandable technology has come a long ways, and a lot of people really enjoy using them.
Okay. See, yeah, I didn't even know that. Like that's why like again, I'm far from being ready to hunt with the bow. I mean, I could probably hunt with the rifle, but not with the bow. I'm still a long ways to be able to do that. But I do enjoy shooting it. And I told you before I need to put more content on my Instagram of me shooting because sometimes I go out there and like I don't even record myself anymore because either like I just had like a really like long day, not necessarily a stressful day, but just a lot of stuff was going on, and I'm just like I just need to like relax and like like when you're shooting a bow, you do need to control your breathing, and that kind of helps when it comes to like anxiety and things like that. So I do enjoy what that provides in terms of like stress relief, right? And I think it's definitely something that people can enjoy, especially if you're doing it at a range, like an indoor range, and it's safe and everything's like uh, properly set up for in case it does go either hits the ground or hits past the target or whatever. So I mean, is that the reason? Is that the same reason, kind of like why you enjoy shooting as well? Like obviously, we're not talking about animals at this point. We're just talking about shooting in general.
Yeah, I don't know. So for me, it's just always been kind of my go-to. If I'm upset or something, I go running. If I'm just having a bad day, I go shooting. Um, and it's just a way, you have a process. And as long as you do the process the same way every time at a close distance with no other factors, the arrow should hit where it's supposed to.
Hmm.
And so it's just, it's yourself getting better. It's working on yourself, and no one else can really do it for you. And so I think it's that aspect of just, it's always you just trying to be better than the last time that you went shooting and relaxing and, you know, not having to worry about everything else because you just worry about hitting the target.
Yeah, I think that's if there's any comparison that we should strive for is basically the comparison of ourselves, like kind of like I talked about with my last guest. That should be the episode that I published right before this one, where it's like you want to compare yourself, like okay, me compare myself to me from yesterday. What went wrong? What went right? What should I keep going? What should I stop doing? Things like that, right? That's really the only comparisons, really, because that's really the only comparisons we should be doing. But a lot of times we get trapped in comparing ourselves with like somebody else that we might like either idolize or respect or whatever.
And that's one of the reasons I loved archery as a kid was whenever my watch came off, sorry, I'm messing with it. Um, is you go to a tournament and basketball, football, you probably wouldn't be friends with the people on the opposing teams. You see them and you're like, oh, those are the rival colors. I hate them. Well, with archery, you are competing against other people, but we're all out there and we're making new friends because we're stuck with them for hours a day, and it's not fast paced like a sports game. It's slow
Mhm.
and steady, and you gotta talk to them or else you're gonna be really bored out there. And so I've got some lifelong friends that I've made, and they're girls that I compete against. But it's competitive, but it's not competitive like other sports because it's
It's
against.
oh, what were you? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What did you say?
Oh, I
The
just
last
said
part.
because most importantly, it's against yourself and trying to beat your previous scores or do something differently that you've been working on.
100%. I think it's like the kind of competition that truly makes us better. Um, that's the kind of competition we should strive for. I mean, granted, I mean, when you're talking about certain other things, like maybe like a little bit more intense competition is required. But again, if it's a case by case situation, most of the time, I don't think it's really beneficial, especially when if you lose a competition and you consistently dwell on it in the wrong way, where it's like, because I mean, there's a different way of like, analyzing what, performance, right? Whether it's like, from an objective standpoint, like, okay, what did I really do wrong? What do I need to improve on? Versus like, you see some people that might be a little bit more of a sore loser, where it's like, oh well, that person only won because of this, or if it wasn't because of this, and that's the kind of stuff you don't really want to dwell on. Um, but a little bit back to like the breathing thing, where I know that, and I haven't really studied this extensively. I just know that I've read some books about breathing, where like how beneficial it really is. And when you look at people that have like anxiety attacks, panic attacks, oftentimes they're struggling to breathe, and it's really because they're already at a point where they're not breathing properly. And usually, I think it was like something like stressed people tend to take shorter breaths, whereas like people that are more relaxed will take a longer breath and release, slower. And that's why, like, people kind of like will tell you, like, when you're having a lot of things going on, and just relax, breathe, relax. And then it's the same thing with
Which
like,
is like the worst thing to tell someone who's having a panic attack, is just to breathe. You
yeah,
gotta distract them some other way.
yeah, right, because you have to get them to start breathing, but you can't just tell them like, hey, breathe slower, like, stop like breathing fast, like,
Yeah, that never works.
no, it's like telling like an open wound, like, hey, stop bleeding, like, yeah, it's not gonna work. It's
Yeah,
not gonna work.
exactly. My dad and I
Yes.
actually found that out the hard way. I had a panic attack on the side of a hill, and I was sitting there hyperventilating, and he was sitting there like, "You need to breathe. What are you doing? You need to breathe." And I was like, "I'm trying, I'm trying," and I'm just crying. And then he finally told me, he was like, "Okay, Stephanie, I need you to stop and just like wiggle your fingers. Can you feel your fingers? Okay, wiggle your toes. Can you feel your toes?" And just sitting there like trying to think about those other different things and bringing feeling back to my body is like what was able to center me. But archery is a great form of meditation,
Hmm.
and shooting guns too. Just anything where you really are. And I don't personally time my breaths with my shot, but I do know, like, to refocus myself before a shot, I always take a deep breath and then start my process.
Hmm.
Some people will hold their breath the entire shot. Some will breathe out right when they shoot. It really just depends on what kind of person you are.
Yeah, because I noticed that I was holding my breath, and like the minute I was getting ready to release, I would exhale, and that would just kind of like throw my shot off a little bit. So I kind of figured out that it's like, okay, breathe, relax, and as I'm aiming, just I'm breathing out, and then when I'm ready to shoot, like by, I don't know what you would say, like, I guess the cycle of the breath I took like was at the end, and that's when I was like the most accurate.
Yeah, just breathe naturally or whatever you're comfortable with, that you're not flinching at the end of the shot, because
Right.
the less movement, the better.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I mean, I've gotten used to like holding, like, because one of the reasons why you and I started having conversations was just because I asked for your opinion, like in terms of like my form, and I started like taking that advice and started figuring out the best way to hold it properly, like how you said, at the right angle, like in that little fold of your hand.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a weird thing. I don't know, because I haven't seen anybody. I mean, I've only seen like a few people that shoot bows, but I haven't seen people do it. But where basically I use like the pinky and I guess the ring finger. I use that kind of like if I'm holding it, but not really. I just kind of use it like I barely put it on like the handle, like
Oh,
it's
I mean, I get made
fingertips.
fun of all the time on Instagram because my pinky's out like this. I really only have my top two fingers holding the grip, and then my pinky and my ring finger, they're just pointing out.
Yeah, like actually for me, it's like the
Yeah.
middle finger is almost pointed out, but everything else is like kind of like grabbing it, but not really. Like
Hmm.
it's
Do you
kind of
use a
weird.
wrist sling on your bow?
Do I use a what?
Wrist sling.
I don't think so.
It's like a paracord.
Oh yeah, yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, they get really tight and they grip the bow right when they release it because they don't have one of those and they're scared of dropping it, at least subconsciously. So that's good that you have one.
No, yeah, I definitely have that. So like I mentioned in the last episode, the person that got me into archery did shoot when he was a kid, but hasn't shot recently. So he kind of was like, "Hey, I need a shooting buddy." I'm like, "All right, fine. I'm down. I'm down for whatever. Let's go." And he told he at least was good, proficient enough to know what I needed to buy, and that was one of the things that he's like, "You need to get that wrist thing." And I was like, "All right, cool."
Yeah, it's always nice to have a mentor to help you get started.
Yeah, he's not I mean, I'm not trying. Sorry, I think the internet went out for a second. You're muted.
Ah,
Yeah. No, yeah. I think the internet's cut out for a split second. I don't know why. Like, I'm just
work
having the.
computers and internet. It's all good.
Yeah. It happened with my last guest as well. Like, it kicked him out of the room. I'm not sure why. It only affected him. But anyway. So, yeah, like I was saying, I'm not trying to diss my buddy, but, you're definitely a lot more proficient. You're a lot more experienced. And, I mean, yeah, you teach as well. So, you know, yeah. But he definitely at least got me to start properly now,
Yeah.
so that
Okay.
was
But
pretty
we
cool.
need those people too, the ones that are just encouraging to call other people up and say, hey, let's go shooting. Because that's
Mm.
what keeps the industry growing. And we need that growth. We need it to keep new people starting every day.
Yeah, and that's why we need when we do post stuff on social media, we need to make sure that it's as technical as possible, it's as safe as possible, and most importantly, like if like you're engaging in stuff like hunting, like it's as most ethical as possible because you don't want to you want to keep it growing, like you said, you don't want to steer people away, and sometimes like people like I mean, granted, there's people that just won't get into it, like for example, hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some people that are like, well, I don't want to do that to a poor animal. It's like, well, no, that person just wasn't trained properly, was a little bit irresponsible. But if you do it responsibly, you'll get a clean, ethical kill, right? So,
I mean, but even if you're doing it as ethically as possible, you still might wound an animal.
mhm.
It happens. And it doesn't mean you're a bad hunter. It doesn't mean you're a non ethical hunter. It just means something went wrong. Think about it, figure out what went wrong so you can do better next time. And as long as you're continuing to grow, I mean, don't run around and wound all the animals, but just as long as you're continuing to grow and get better, those situations will happen, but the amount of them will get smaller and smaller and hopefully turn into none.
Yeah,
Um, but it's not like everyone who wounds an animal is just an unethical hunter.
yeah,
We're all just
that is
doing.
true. No, yeah, that's true. I'm glad you kind of like corrected me on that because yeah, so that is a good point to make. But so yeah, like I was saying, like there's some people like for example, like again, firearms. There's some people that I don't know if I talked about this in the last episode, but I don't know what it is, and it really like makes me kind of cringe a little bit. But just like basic firearm safety, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. And like I see people doing skits what they're trying to do with guns, and I don't know if their guns are real or not. I'm assuming they're real, just because again, you know, etiquette. But like they just have their finger on the trigger, and I'm just like come on, like stop. And
Or their
I've got
muzzle pointed at their buddy.
oh, that's the worst one, yeah. Like that. Even if they don't have like their finger on the trigger, still have the muzzle pointing at their buddy or it's at something that they're not willing to shoot. It's like no, don't do that, please. You know, and that's like you see sometimes people like because there's really skilled like target shooters like like for sport that they can do like all these little cool like finesse tricks like where like they have the bullet with the slide open on a handgun, and then they flip the bullet and it lands inside the chamber the right way, and they're able to shoot like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, yeah, it looks cool, but you might want to put some kind of like caption that's like, make sure like you don't do this at home or something, because
You never know
yeah,
who's gonna copy you.
exactly. So, but yeah, that's just. But I mean, people are gonna do stuff, and I don't know. We can only do so much. But as long as like we're you know doing things the responsible way, the safe way, we're already doing our part.
Yes.
So, but quickly to segue into the next topic,
Mm-hmm.
because you do you do a lot. You teach. And another things that well, the topic that I just recently came across is like something called high functioning anxiety, which I didn't know was a thing. I didn't know that the words were those were the words that were allocated to that. But yeah, like basically, long story short, it means that like even though you're really productive and you're doing a whole lot and you're succeeding a lot, like you still struggle with anxiety, right? And I think, like I
Sometimes
told my
without even realizing it too. You,
exactly.
people don't pick up on what the anxiety is coming out as.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why a lot of times we don't really. I mean, we're already not talking about mental health to start off with, but even like something like this, it's not really talked about because like for example, like one thing that is listed as like a negative, like I guess like a negative sign or negative effect of anxiety, of that kind of anxiety, is that you won't look at somebody in the eye like when you're talking to them. And I know for the longest time that was my case, and I just didn't realize. I was like, maybe that's why I feel so weird whenever I do make eye contact with someone, and it's like, why do I feel like kind of panicky a little bit? Like obviously I'm a little exaggerating because I'm not
Mm-hmm.
getting a panic attack, but I do feel anxious.
Right.
So do you have some experiences with that as well, or?
So last year, actually, when I still worked for Fish and Wildlife, I was running into, and I was like, I don't know if it's COVID or what's going on, but basically shortness of breath. So it felt like I always had to catch my breath, but no matter what I did, I just couldn't catch my breath. So I was sitting there, and to like other people, it looked like I was yawning, but like really long, continuous yawns. And so I was sitting in meetings, and this was before my boss knew that something was going on. And when I finally went and told him, I was like, hey, something's going on. I'm seeing a doctor. He was like, oh, I just thought you were really tired at all of our meetings. And I was like, oh, no, not true. But so I was on state working for the state. So I had good health insurance at the time. So I was able to go get a lot of tests done. So, the first thing was, is it COVID? Because shortness of breath was one of the side effects of that. It wasn't that. So I got a lot of allergy testing done. They went and took stress tests on my heart, whatever the ultrasound on my heart is, an echo, I think. They did heart rates, everything. Went to a pulmonologist. He looked at my lungs. Like, I went and saw all the specialists. And then none of them found anything. And they're like, you're a really healthy girl. We don't know what's wrong with you. And they just sent me away, and like no one followed up with me again. So I was talking to one of my friend's mom, who's a counselor, and I was telling her what I was going through. And she was like, it just sounds like you have high functioning anxiety. And I was like, so I just spent all of this money on tests, and well, now it's just labeled as anxiety. So I was like, it's great if that is actually what it is, but also there's no test for it.
Right.
And everyone who has it has a different symptom. So I just hope that it's not some over umbrella term that everyone gets labeled with when they can't figure out what's actually wrong with you.
Yeah, that you make a good point because like I know I sent you that article, right? And it has a bunch of positive, but I mean at the very least that article had like some positive aspects of that hey, well, if you're a highly functioning anxious person, it's not the end of the world. I mean, that means that you're never late. It means that you're always punctual, you're detail oriented, so at least there's a positive spin on that, right?
Right.
And but like you said, like it really shouldn't be like, because that's one of the things I have talked about in previous episodes, that we shouldn't get stuck under we shouldn't get stuck with these umbrella terms, like you said, because it's just like, all right, well, we don't know what's wrong with you, like you said, here's this. And like
Mm-hmm.
I had a dude that he's a vet, right? And he got denied by the VA multiple times because, or not denied, but like when he would go to seek out help because he knew that there was something wrong with him, they would look at him and be like, well, you're perfectly fine. You're obviously here like seeking for help, but you look fine. So it's,
You look
they didn't really
healthy.
treat exactly. So they didn't really treat him. So he had to go somewhere separate to really kind of like start opening up about all that stuff. And it's like one of those things like, that gets overlooked at. And it's the gist of like one of the reasons why I started the podcast. And I keep saying that over and over again, I know, but it's one of the things that definitely upsets me a lot, because it's like, just because someone looks okay doesn't necessarily mean they are okay. Like you need to spend some time talking to that person to really understand. And right now, just because I guess, we talked about attention span in the last episode, right? And
Mhm.
I think because of that, we're more quick to just slap a label on something than we are to actually understand. Like somebody told me that they went to a doctor because they were feeling again shortness of breath and everything, and after they basically said that they don't have any purpose in life or whatever, and the doctor's like, well, the best thing I can do is give you this that makes you forget about that. And I was like, really? Like that's the best thing we can do? Like that can't be the best thing we can do.
No, yeah, that's sad. That's terrible.
Yeah, it's really bad. And that's kind of like where I think um, the more conversations we have, like that's kind of why I also included the outdoors and other activities. Is like if you could kind of see like, oh well, maybe I should try archery or something, like like look at things like that, and I think that will definitely help. I mean, it's one of those things that we don't have necessarily the ways of really talking about this or avenues of how to talk about this. So that's kind of like what's messed up. And even like when we look at like somebody as a high functioning anxious person, like how many successful people do we see, like celebrities and stuff like that, that commit suicide?
Mhm.
And it's ridiculous because we think, well, oh my god, this guy is super famous, has all this money, is on this like this many TV shows or whatever, and everybody wants to hang out with them. But we don't really know the struggles they're going on to begin with, right?
Right. Beneath the surface.
Yeah, and like some people, like I feel like some people like they have certain issues, but then like they get into like something like fame, but they weren't ready to begin with. But at the same time, how do you identify that before you go into something, right? Like
Right.
people that are like big YouTube stars or big social media influencers, you know, sometimes they have the most fragilest of personalities and things like that.
Yeah. I actually ran into a guy on the range the other day and I was shooting with him and I invited him to come to a league or a 3D shoot or something and his comment was, "No, I kind of just like to come out and shoot by myself. I was a vet and I'm dealing with some PTSD." I'm condensing the story a little bit, but
Mm.
archery was just his way to go out and be by himself and get away from those thoughts. And it's great. And a lot of outdoor activities are that way because they're a way, either to go kind of meditate or just to turn your thoughts to something else rather than focusing on everything else that you have to do or the memories that are coming. Or, if you're fighting with someone, you can just go, you can shoot your bow and it takes your mind off of it for a little while.
Yeah, my family knew because through another family, we knew somebody that I think he went. I hope I didn't botch this. I think he definitely went to fight in Iraq, and then when he came back, like he was pretty messed up to a point where he tells us, or somebody that we also know that was with them tells a story of like when they were driving, they were in a pickup truck, and the pickup truck was stick shift, and like the clutch made like a weird like smacking sound, and that dude's first, and he was just laying down like just like not necessarily sleeping, but he was just kind of like dozing off, and when he heard that sound, the very first instinct was grab the rifle, and like he grabbed the clutch like it was gonna be a rifle, and it was like, oh, relax, like we're okay, we're okay. And but again, if you talk to that person, like you wouldn't think like, oh, this dude's struggling with anything, like yeah, like he saw some messed up stuff over there, but you would think, okay, he looks okay. But until a situation comes up that triggers it, you won't really know.
100%. And that's why it's really important to find an activity that works well with you or find a professional to talk to that can actually help you through your issues, or not even issues, but just help you figure things out so that you can know how to combat something if it does come up like that.
Yeah, but in yeah, and I mean that's very good, honestly, because the problem is also we don't really seek out help.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're in denial.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's like this thing that it's embarrassing to go
Mhm.
talk to a counselor or a therapist, but there's no reason that it should be. But maybe if that is, maybe you pick up archery and you go or you go kayaking or you go fishing and you find something that is your way of coping with things versus talking with someone. But getting it out in the open and having someone who's trained to get deep down. I know we're not supposed to make recommendations, but um,
Mhm. Well, I mean, kind of suggestions, or I guess,
suggestions, yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
go.
not. Oh, good.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it's always a good idea, even if you feel perfectly fine. It's funny what they can pull out of you sometimes.
Yeah, and back to that vet that I told you about that got not well got turned down by the VA. He was telling me that when he went to this one mental health group, uh, everybody in there I think was from the Vietnam War, and they were all like in their 60s. He was the only one that was like late 20s, right? And the one thing they all said to him was like, "Good for you, young man. Like, good for you for admitting that you have, stuff that you need to work through.
Hmm.
Because if we were smart enough when we were like younger, we would have done this a lot younger. But we would have done this a lot younger. But we were always in denial, and we've had our issues with it that bit us in the butt, and it's something that we regret not seeking out sooner. So good for you that you're seeking it out sooner. And yeah, I don't know what to say after that. It was just like, oh my god.
Yeah, and I mean, I've worked with kids a lot. I've worked in a preschool and I coach them now, and that's something we try to instill in them at a super young age is just those social skills,
Mhm.
how to interact with other people. And I don't know where that suppression comes from, but it's amazing how like you just go find an activity that you can both bond over and how comfortable you get with them and you can open up to other people and just let them know your story, and just starting to tell your story and actually attaching to it can make a big difference
Mhm.
versus just like trying to distance and ignore whatever's going on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing too about like social media too. It's very easy to just kind of write someone off, right? You don't know the person, you're just talking to them behind a screen. So it's very easy to write that person off. Like, then like for example, like for me, like if I reach out to, I mean, I know it's not the same thing, but if I reach out, for example, to like you, like, and sometimes like I'll get like, oh, this guy's just trying to hit on me, and like things is like, whatever, right? And vice versa as well. Like,
Hmm.
so I mean, obviously that's something separate than what we're talking about in terms of mental health, but there's miscommunication all the time.
Right. It froze again. All right, everyone, it's still recording. Um, he should come back any second, so I'm just gonna sit here and wait.
We're back.
We are back.
Okay.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
telling
So
jokes.
you were telling jokes?
No, I'm just kidding, but I should have been.
I was gonna say I missed it. Dang. But yeah. So like I don't know why like this place that I'm at, like it's kind of spotty sometimes with the internet, but yeah, it's never happened to where it's this bad where it's like twice in one episode. But yeah, like obviously, like I was saying, like that example is a little different. But we're talking about like social media where it's like we're already having like it's hard enough to get sarcasm. A lot of people are sarcastic, so
Hmm.
sometimes that gets overblown even with amongst friends and family, and imagine with a stranger. So it's very easy to write somebody off, and the it's almost a chore to really be positive on social media again because again, like sometimes like you have like these people that like are just like Instagram models that want to like just I don't know, great make a good caption, so they're trying their hardest to be really deep. It kind of looks a little, what's the word? Not genuine,
Fake.
So yeah, a little fake. Yeah, that's much better. And there's a lot of that, right? But when you look at like the positive of like a social media is like for example, like you and I met through social, well, not officially, but we met through social media. I've met several other people
Hmm.
through the fishing community that are great, and I'm now like I'm meeting them up here to go fish, and we don't necessarily have to talk about stuff, but just being out fishing with somebody, hey, it feels a lot better than just being fishing by yourself.
I mean, safety in numbers too, especially as a female going out to the range. I know there's a lot of homeless people, and nothing against all homeless people, but some of them are anyone, even non-homeless people, are dangerous when you run into them in the woods. So I always like taking a buddy or two. So I know that from the ladies I've met on Instagram, I've got a great list of people that I can always be like, hey, who wants to go shoot today? And
Hmm.
I've got a bunch that will answer and say, hey, yeah, I'll go. Let's go.
Yeah. No, and I'm pretty sure like you ran into a community of archers that, even though they're not near where you're at, but you can still talk about stuff and you like each other's stories and stuff like that. And every once in a while, like you'll make somebody will make a funny video, they'll crack a joke about it or something, and it just gives you a little bit more to laugh about.
I don't know if you're on it, but there's an archery memes page where he just pokes fun at all the pro archers.
Oh wow.
And it's hilarious. But the great thing is they all just I don't know if they actually know who runs it or not. But they all just take it in stride and they all sit there and laugh at themselves and each other. And it's hilarious. But that's actually where I get the most archery news about what's going on. Is he's always on top of it. Or she. I don't know. But yeah.
Whoever that person is, yeah.
Whoever that page is.
Well, did you ever see? I think what is it, Aussie something? I forgot what that YouTube channel was. But he basically narrates stuff from like an Australian, with an Australian accent. I don't know if he is Australian or not. But like, there's times where like he narrates, like, I don't know, like I'm definitely butchering it, but like it's like a swan or a chicken going up against like a crocodile, and he's like, oh, look at this, like
I know exactly what you're talking about.
right. So I always laugh at those just because it's just hilarious, especially I mean, it's not him, but it's when Snoop Dogg does narrates nature. Have you seen that one?
No.
Oh man, I'll send you the link, but
Okay.
it's hilarious. He narrates I forgot what I think there might be meerkats. I don't remember, but he narrates that, and it's hilarious. I'll find that video and I'll send it to you because
Okay.
oh my god,
I need a laugh tonight. I can't wait to see it.
yeah, I'll send it to you after we're done. Because oh man, but it's like a lot of stuff that we can have fun with like that, and it's good, clean fun. It's not offensive or it's not like necessarily trying to offend anybody. And yeah, but again, at the end of the day, we have to be a little bit more patient with people. I always say like we don't necessarily have to be. Everybody can't necessarily be best friends. Like it's impossible, and you don't have the time to really dedicate to somebody,
Right.
to everybody, right? But at the very least, they stop and say hi back.
Be respectful, for sure.
Be respectful. You never know if like maybe saying like, oh, have a nice day to somebody randomly, like.
One of my biggest one of my biggest goals is don't ever be the reason that someone gives up shooting. So, and there was a tournament I went to with my cousin, and I shot. It was the R100, which is the Reinhardt, takes around a trailer of 100 targets, and you get to shoot a bunch of novelty targets and a whole bunch of stuff. And I hope he doesn't mind me calling him out here. He probably doesn't even remember this. But I shot over 1,000 points, which means you get a pin from the tournament. Well, he didn't. He hadn't been shooting as long as I had. He was just there to have fun with me and my family. But they just had the bag of pins sitting on the table. So he just went and grabbed one. And so I remember on the way home, someone made a comment about us both having pins and how cool it was. And I made a comment like, well, he didn't earn his. I don't think he's shot to this day.
Are you serious?
He still has a bow and he keeps talking about getting back into it, but that was the last time he ever shot with me.
Oh no.
And so like I know how awful it is. You don't know what comment is going to be the comment. And that applies to everything. Just always count to 10 or, just pause and think about what the action or the reaction to what your words are going to be.
And, one of the things that this podcast is definitely helping me because, I mean, I'm far from perfect. I mean, just being able to speak on a camera was already a nightmare for me. And like, I've gotten to the point where, hey, I don't feel as like my palms are getting sweaty anymore, like when I'm talking or anything like that. So it's getting to that point, which is good. But aside from all the stuff that I'm learning around mental health or, different stories that I'm coming across, the one thing that's definitely helping me because I suffer from foot and mouth syndrome, like no other, but it's definitely helping me to pause and think about what the next sentence is going to be. So, and it's like that patience that like, okay, just don't. And it's apparently another negative effect or negative attribute of high functioning anxiety, the fact that you get all chatty. And again, that applies to me as well, because it's like,
yes, me. Um,
yeah, I mean, it's just, I can't tell you the number of times where I knew it's like, I'm not gonna like say the word, like say the bad word, but I was like, oh crap, I messed up, didn't I? And immediately not even when the sentence finishes, like when I start the sentence, it's like, oh, too late, I already messed up.
right. Yeah, we're doing public talks. I used to work on a whale watching boat, and so I would have to go out and give my spiel at the beginning of the trip or whatever. And the one thing I learned from I learned a lot of stuff, but the one big takeaway was no one cares if you pause. People will pick up if you say or like or the over and over again. But if you take a 2-second pause and formulate what you're going to say, no one even notices. They just think it's like dramatic effect. They don't know that you don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and if you don't show them in your face like that wasn't planned, and that it was planned, and it's like they won't know. Like, because even I started teaching kickboxing, and that's the one thing that the guy that was teaching me was like, if you make a mistake, don't let them know it's a mistake. If you do the wrong,
it's their fault.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like if you do the wrong punch, just go with it. That's the combination that you're giving.
You don't whack them in the face.
Yeah, as long as I don't whack them in the face, that's true. Yeah. So, and that's one thing that I definitely learned also from fishing, archery, even shooting firearms. A lot of aspects of like the outdoors can really be applied to just life in general. Like, I don't know, when you agree, like there's different concepts of like soft skills that you need in archery that can be applied to everyday life. What do you think?
I mean, oh yeah, even like in my NASPS trainings that I'm giving to school teachers, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a tip now that's going to like, it's relationship advice and I'm going to save your marriage. So, yeah, everything crosses over.
Like even like the breathing stuff that we're talking about, right? Like controlling controlling your breathing, patience of all things, right? Like being patient.
Sportsmanship.
Sportsmanship, and just overall like not getting too cocky, because again, you're responsible for what comes out of your bow. I mean, that's the saying in firearms, you're responsible for what comes out of your barrel. So you have to be really, I don't know if meticulous is the right word, but you have to be really careful of how you get into things. So it's the same thing with like how you interact with somebody, especially somebody that's not mentally healthy. Because I mean, like you like, what's that?
I was just gonna say, so it's like always pick up a gun like you think it's loaded. Yeah. Always talk to someone like you assume that you don't know what's going on beneath the surface. Just be nice. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah, and I've talked about it with one of my entrepreneur buddies. We've talked about it on this podcast where we're looking at like, oh, well, we're trying to be this financial person, or we're trying to be like this fitness person. And like, you've seen in football where like you see those videos where the coaches are yelling at somebody, right? That kind of aspect doesn't always apply to everything, right? I've said it multiple times, and I probably will keep saying it the more episodes I go through with this. Like for some people, yeah, a swift kick in the butt, that might do it and, get them working. For some people, that swift kick in the butt is going to drive them deeper and deeper, and then you might be responsible for what happens next. And, knock on wood that it doesn't get too serious,
Right. And being sensitive is not a bad thing. It's just learning how to work with your sensitivity.
Right. So that's also a huge one, because I think, I mean, it's getting a little bit better from what I can tell. I don't know if that's me being naive or if I'm just being a little optimistic, but yeah, because again, we're going back to the story that the vet that was on the show basically said, where it's like, they didn't want to seem as weak. They didn't want to seem sensitive. They want to seem vulnerable. So that's why they didn't get help until they were in their 60s. This is when we're talking about the group setting when he was at, so it's one of those things where like, yeah, we don't have to be all like touchy feely, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't process those feelings, right? Or those, emotions, right? Like it doesn't necessarily mean that we all have to like, I don't know, eat ice cream and watch a rom com and like the process our feelings that way. Like I know I'm being kind of a jerk, but that's just the only example that came into mind right now. Uh, but we don't need to do that. Like, I mean, because I know that applies to breakups, right, or something like that. Is that what that is?
I mean, I guess.
I guess I don't know. I've never experienced that, but I've.
I
It's
go
a trope.
running, so I don't know.
It's a trope on like rom coms and different
I feel like
like what
that's
is
a
it?
rom-com like theme that you just or a
Yeah,
cliche.
yeah. So yeah, yeah. It's if it the way I see it is like if it's a trope on pop culture, then it definitely has to be somewhat true. There has to be some element of truth to it. But like again, we don't have to like, oh my god, this person was being mean to me and didn't let me fish in this one spot. He took my fishing spot. I'm gonna go cry with a tub of ice cream. Like, no, I mean, we're not talking like again. I'm oversimplifying,
Right. But
but
no, that absolutely happens.
mm-hmm.
I have kids where they miss the target because they did something wrong, and I've had them throw their bows before. I had an adult man who, oh, this is funny. I don't remember if he was hunting or if he was at a tournament, but he had a bad shot and he took his bow and he chucked it into the lake. He went and cooled off, and the next day he had to go for a swim to go back and get his bow.
Exactly, and that's what I mean by like controlling your emotions because it doesn't like it doesn't necessarily have to be sadness that you're trying to control. It could be anger, which a lot of times we don't. We leave it unchecked, and we end
Right.
up having to fish it in the lake for a bow.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's kind of like to give an example, it's learning to control yourself. It's just to control those ums, or like when you're hiking and I trip all the time, so I'm always watching my feet. Or
Mm-hmm.
or when I'm skating across the parking lot in Montana when everything's frozen over. You got to learn how to fall. And so that goes to life. You can't just let it tumble you over. You can't just fall. You got to either learn how to catch yourself, and you got to learn how to throw your foot just right. Um, because we're not used to moving our foot in midair,
Yeah,
or um, or learning to turn yourself and not just let life take its course, but when you're roller skating or whatever, you're supposed to turn and fall on your butt so that you don't break your arm, because you're never supposed to stick your arm out. So it's just little things like that, and it's 100%, life references, little cliche sayings. Um, but we could go into so many of those with the outdoors and everything. You could write an entire book probably.
Ooh, that gives me an idea to write a book because I do want to write a book eventually. So
That'd
yeah,
be so cool. I'll buy one. Even if
thanks.
it's not any good, I'll buy one.
I'm hoping that it's good though. I don't want to
Okay.
just put out garbage.
Okay. I'll read
Yeah,
it. It'll be awesome, I bet.
feel free if it is garbage by like the first, I don't know, 20 pages. You feel free to just tell me, hey, it's garbage. I couldn't get past the first 20 pages. Like I stopped it, and you will not hurt my feelings. I promise. It'll just try to. I will have to process it, and at this point, take my own advice. Process that rejection, that deception. I guess
Constructive criticism.
exactly. Process it that way versus just like, oh, she hates my book. Damn it, I'm never gonna write again. Nope,
Right?
I'll improve.
Yeah. Don't
So
give up. Keep going.
yeah. So it definitely like yeah, like you said like don't be the reason why somebody stops doing what they're doing, right? But at the same time, we also have to be a little bit accountable of ourselves and how we control certain things. And at the end of the day, when you're shooting, whether you're shooting a bow, a gun, or you're casting out, it's all about really how you control that situation. And it's not something to be a control freak over it, but just try to control the variables that you know you can control. Don't worry about the variables that you can't.
Absolutely.
So, all right, we're about 2 minutes before, actually a minute before we before the hour mark. Any last thoughts or anything you want to reemphasize or reiterate or something?
Be nice. Don't be the reason someone is going to give up, because we need as many shooters and hunters and conservationists out there that we can get to keep public land public and wildlife happy and living. So have fun.
Ditto. Ditto. I know I 100% echo that, and then I'll just add to the fact that I don't think we were meant to be stuck in concrete walls. We definitely were meant to be more outside, right?
Yes.
So we have plenty of opportunities right now to be outside, and I think we should take advantage of that as much as possible and just enrich ourselves and, even get some kind of spiritual enrichment out of it. Just, I know it kind of sounds maybe a little hippie-ish, but, just be one with nature, really, really respect it. That way it respects you. And, cause it can provide, but at the same time, you got to respect it. Otherwise it won't be there for us, for all of us.
Exactly. Let's save it for the future generations.
Exactly. All right. So tell everybody again where they could find you. I know that you have your Instagram page, but if there's anything else that, you want to share, go ahead.
All right. So you can find me at the Archer Steph on Instagram and Facebook. I also have a website, a blog that I do, stephanierustad.com. And I'm also a contributor for Miss Pursuit now. So go read my blog post over on their page. And there's lots of other women. There's like 20 of us who are just putting out awesome articles about everything outdoors under the sun. So if you don't follow Miss Pursuit yet, it's a good page to be on. I'm already learning so much.
You're gonna have to send me those links. That way I can put them in the, like, whether it's on YouTube or when I post it on Instagram. So that way I can put those together. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Al. It was so fun to be here with you and talk.
Yeah. And it's always fun to talk. Hopefully there's another episode soon. I'll definitely give you a break before this one. So, but I definitely do appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to come and have a conversation again. And as always, it's a good conversation.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I will talk to you later. And to everybody else that are still listening and watching, thank you for listening. And we'll keep this going and hope to see you guys soon. Yep. Bye.